Okay, so let's talk about Hereditary. This is a movie we've already talked about on the channel way back in the day. You could definitely go check out that video, but I do want to give a more better video than I did back then, because back then the videos were not all there. But let's talk about this movie, which is still one of my favorite horror movies, probably top 5 horror movies of all time, and definitely one of A24's strongest in my opinion. So you basically follow this family, and the family is part of this cult, unbeknownst to them, however, and the grandmother was the leader of it, and the whole thing with the cult throughout was they were trying to get this demon from hell. Well, I don't know if you want to call them a demon. We will make a video talk about payment more, but they were this entity and they wanted to get this entity on Earth, and the only way to do so was to give it a human vessel, which had to be a male. And of course, it didn't work when they tried to do it with a girl at the beginning, Charlie, and we later find out that Charlie was inhabited by Paimon this whole time, and they were throughout this whole deal trying to figure out how do we get Paimon into the male body that Paimon wants. And that's where Peter comes in, who is the son, the brother to Charlie, the son to Annie, and we realize quickly that the whole events of Hereditary were all planned out by the cult, and the cult has been there throughout the whole time. So let's get on with the beginning, where we start off with the grandmother being buried, and the grandmother of course having the sigil, the necklace on her that is the cult symbol. And so we see that this symbol goes throughout the whole movie, as we see certain words as well plastered throughout the wall, and you could say the writing was on the wall throughout the whole time as well. Ari Aster has talked about this as well, with some of the words being on there: Satoni, Sasas, or Lift Talk Pandemonium, all throughout the walls of the house. So pretty much you know that the cult has been here as well. We also see several creepy people throughout the movie smiling at the family, including Charlie at the beginning, and also throughout the whole house. We see that there's people outside as well when it's nighttime, and they're just standing around eerily. So the cult has had eyes on them the whole time. Even one person that Annie meets at one of the groups, she thinks is just some random person that doesn't know her at all. We find out at the end is another cult member, and it really goes to show the depths of cults as well that they go to sort of put their claws into this family as they were from the beginning. And it's something that Annie says is the reasoning she sort of like found some distance away from her mother after her firstborn Peter, because of what had happened to her brother. As we find out, he actually unalived himself because he was feeling that the mother was trying to do something to him, put voices in him, people in him, and they sort of brushed it off as schizophrenia at the time. But as we now know, the grandmother was in the cult from the beginning and was sort of trying to use her son as a vessel for payment. And this is something that Annie maybe had an idea of at the time, and that is the reason that she took her kids away from her mother. But as we later find out, the grandmother came back into this whole family with the birth of Charlie, the girl who we see at the beginning. And we can hear that Annie talks about this as how she sort of put herself into Annie and sort of put her claws on her, as she says, which means that Annie was not successful in protecting Charlie, and Charlie was the vessel for payment this whole time, which could kind of explain why Charlie felt a little off, which could kind of explain why Annie felt closer to her grandmother and also was more off throughout the whole story until her demise came. And that same pole where we see that Charlie loses her head in has the sigil that the grandmother had as well. So we can pretty much say that all of this was orchestrated and planned by the cult, because they needed Charlie gone and they needed to break down the family more. Because in many of these like possession stories and everything, we know that these like demons or entities get more energy as there is more like dread and sadness and sorrow in a family or a person, and it sort of breaks down the spirit of that person. So it's easier for these spirits or these entities to inhabit the host that they want to inhabit. And that's the reason I think that we see this cult sort of orchestrating the downfall of this family, even leading to the death of the husband, who was sort of the one who told Annie, you need to put some distance between you and your mother because there's something like going on here. And it's implied that he was sort of like the protector of sorts. So once that wall came down, that's when we saw Annie be inhabited by the spirits at the end of the movie. And basically that whole climax with the banging on everything, that happened and the head cut off. We don't want to get further into that because this is one of the scariest movie moments of all time, in my opinion. But we basically saw by the end of it, Peter was the one they wanted to use the whole time to be the vessel for payment. And that's why at the end of it, we see that they break down Peter the most, all the way leading up until the very end, when we see Peter is crowned and everything, and seemingly has these and is seemingly inhabited by Charlie and Payman at the same time, as they say that basically Payman was in Charlie all this time and now is in Peter and will now be the ruler, and they want all of the riches that come with it, whatever that may be, which we'll talk about in the video about Payman later this week. I do have that video coming out for you, so stay tuned for that. But basically that's how the story ends. Payman has come to life. Annie and her whole family are destroyed. There is nothing left of them, honestly, because at this point Peter is just a vessel. Payman is inhabiting his body, and the cult succeeded in doing what they wanted to do from the beginning, which was make a vessel for Payman to inhabit. That was the grandmother who was trying to do this as well. And so that's what we see at the end, is the victory of the cult, as Payman is now ruler for them and sort of will unleash whatever hell it may be that they want Payman to unleash. And we don't know exactly what the riches they were promised, but we'll talk more about that as I do a video on Payman themselves, which is something I wanted to do back then. But basically that's pretty much your Hereditary story right there. So let's get more into what Ari Aster said about certain things in the movie and talk a little bit more in depth about it as well. So camera shut off right there, so we're definitely just going to go to the mic right now. But yeah, like I said, this movie basically dealt with, from the beginning, this cult trying to sort of get Payman a body that it wanted, and the body that Payman wanted was a male body, as they say. And so we hear Ari Aster talk about that as well, because this film became a horror film because of that, but at the same time it is a family tragedy after tragedy, as we see a family be broken down through these very horrific accidents and deaths that happen, which don't seem that much of an accident when you really think about that this whole cult has been behind all of this. As I said, the sigil is everywhere in the movie, and especially in that pole scene, which is what causes Charlie's death. And I think that is a very important thing to keep in mind here. Now, like I said, the writing is on the wall, and as we see the words Satoni, Sasas, Lift Talk, Pandemonium all throughout the walls of the home, we know that the cult and the grandmother have definitely been ones that have sort of kicked this plan into high gear right here. So this is what Ari Aster had to say during a Reddit AMA about this. Those are isolated pieces of an invocation spell that is suggested to be written all over the house. We only see 3 of these in the film, but there are many more, probably written behind furniture or otherwise hidden. Lift Took Pandemonium has a special significance. It translates as open up chaos or hell. And so I think that that's interesting to see right here, that this is something that was laid out. So everything was pretty much presented to us there. We also know that this isn't the first time that this cult or the grandmother have tried to get Payman onto Earth, as Ari Aster points to the older brother that Annie talks about that pretty much was diagnosed with schizophrenia and hanged himself. And I think it's interesting, after the whole thing with the brother and Annie sort of finding some distance from her and her mother, that once she actually let her back in and she was just giving birth to Charlie, that it was sort of the way that Charlie was turned into Payman. So this is what Ari Aster said during an interview with Variety. Charlie is the first successful host for Payman. It's transferred from Charlie to Peter at the end. It's Payman from the moment she's born. I mean, there's a girl that was displaced, but she was displaced from the very beginning. And so, yeah, you could definitely know that from the very beginning we are seeing Payman in the flesh, but this is not the body that Payman wanted. Payman wanted a male body, although it's not explained exactly why, but it is definitely a reasoning. I think that the cult sort of was like, all right, we need to put this plan in motion to get Payman the body that it needs, because we are trying to ask for something and it is not happy with us right now, so it is not going to give us that something. So it was sort of the cult being like, yeah, let's give Payman exactly what Payman wants. And I think that that is an interesting way to look at the film now, as you pretty much just see that Payman has been there this whole time and the cult has been there this whole time as well. Definitely a movie that I really do enjoy and just wanted to talk about a little bit more. Let me know your thoughts and opinions on it. We can definitely talk more about payment as well and some hidden things in the movie. I do want to make some more videos talking about some of the older movies that I've covered in the channel and making them a little bit better than they were before. So definitely stay tuned for that, because we'll be talking about more of that pretty soon. But as always, that is going to do it for me. Like I said, if you haven't already subscribe, comment, like, share, all that good stuff. We are on the road to 50,000 subscribers. We are so close to it. So once we get to 30,000, we will have another giveaway, so you don't want to miss out on that. But as always, that's going to do it for me. I'll see all of you next time. We will have the payment video out this weekend. But as always, stay safe, stay positive.